the Sports 32 Roundtable with Tim Van Vorn from Fox 6 in Milwaukee and high school football aficionado Steve Haise talking the talk winner. Let's talk some college football, because did you realize that Saturday night at Camp Randall will be the first time since 1962 that two top 10 teams have met on that field? That's amazing. You've got Wisconsin against Nebraska, Nebraska's Big Ten debut. This is the spotlight game in all of college football. Game day, the whole bit this weekend.
Well, and you read the preseason publications going into the college season. They give you 5 games to watch all year. This was on everybody's list, no question about it. Nebraska's first foray into Big Ten conference play. Wisconsin with the tremendous home field atmosphere and environment and expected to be a good team. And both teams have played well to this point. Nebraska tested by what? Washington a little bit, but otherwise you'd say Wisconsin not tested, but also not screwing up. I mean, Wisconsin has done what it's supposed to do and has played well. Clash of the Titans on a very busy sports weekend.
Both 4-0. Nebraska also with a potent offense. They got a quarterback by the name of Taylor Martinez that they're very high on. How do you see this game shaping up?
I think that there are just a few areas, and they're small, that I think the Badgers have to worry about. Might be a little bit concerned with some of the penalties, not the smartest things that they've been doing lately. But maybe a little something in the kicking game because they're young. Those would be the areas I'd be concerned. Other than that, I think the Badgers, from what we've seen, have looked great. Nebraska, haven't really delved into it deep enough to know.
Big favorite, though. Wisconsin's a pretty big favorite, and you just know that's the rallying cry in Lincoln this week. Oh, no respect for us at all. Here we come. Let's show them what we can do with Nebraska football.
Bo Pelini is the head coach at Nebraska. Tim, you're very familiar with him from his days as an assistant coach with the Packers. And certainly this is an interesting time for the Big Ten Conference. You look at the results over the weekend, for example, and the Big Ten will get a lot of positive publicity this week because of this game, but North Dakota State beat Minnesota at home by 13. North Texas beat Indiana. No one wants to talk about that on the Big Ten Network these days, I'm sure, but this one they want to talk about.
This one is the one that we only one game this weekend, I think, in the Big Ten. If you're on the Conference Network channel, it's a great game. There's really no way about it. I think it will probably rise to the level of the build-up as well. Don't know who will win it, but I have to believe it's going to be played out as a good football game.
I would say this, Steve, you don't have to be an expert on Nebraska football to think that they will not be in awe of a nighttime huge crowd at Camp Randall, because they're used to playing in big game situations in front of huge crowds.
Right. I don't think that that's really going to be an issue for them at all. I think both teams, if it lives up to the hype, that's the problem. Doesn't get overhyped. You know what I mean? There's too much said about it, and then it ends up being a turkey. But I think both teams, it should just be a well of a game. I think they're so even on both sides. They're very similar on a lot of areas too, with what their goals are offensively. Everything is kind of geared up almost to be a mirror image at a lot of times.
I think we know the Badgers' offense is terrific. I don't know what to think yet about the Badgers' defense.
Right.
We'll start to form some conclusions Saturday night.
Well, and I think coming into the season, you said not sure about the pieces on the front. Obviously, they had a lot to replace from last year. The guys have been fine so far, but they haven't played a team like Nebraska so far. And they've had a few ticky-tack injuries in the back. Now, do you go down a player or two with back there, and then that starts to show up in a game like this? I like Steve's point about these teams being mirror images. The reputation of both is big, huge offensive linemen, and they're going to run it. Well, Martinez and Wilson give you an interesting dynamic at quarterback, which means you don't have to play the old Nebraska way or the old Wisconsin.
Home in front of their fans on Saturday night. Let's talk about the reshaping of college sports that's going on over the weekend.
And they don't.
Right.
Great advantage for the Badgers to be at again. Texas A&M officially joining the SEC beginning next year. Lee Corso recently quoted Steve as saying it's inevitable. You're going to have 4 16-team super conferences in football. If that's the case, where does that leave a University like Marquette, which doesn't play football?
Right, exactly. I think that what they'll probably end up having to look at as an option is finding, the top echelon basketball-only schools and creating that basketball powerhouse conference. I don't know if you're going to look into working with a DePaul in that situation. Obviously, it's not the high-end as they used to be. But if you look at maybe some of the old contacts, for lack of a better term, when they were an independent, they had to play, and creating something there that is a basketball-only type powerhouse, I think that's probably going to be the best thing that Marquette can do. Hopefully, it's strong enough that it can hang, and if it is 4 powerhouses, maybe the basketball end of thing might take it to a 5th.
You know what's sobering to me, Tim, is if you're Marquette, for example, and you're an alum of Marquette, Kansas, with one of the richest basketball traditions around, they're kind of just off to the side because they're not strong in football. Well, if that's the case with a Kansas, then you see the lack of leverage that Marquette has.
Certainly, very few cards to play if you're Marquette right now. Marquette has a lot to offer, but in this grand scheme, not a lot that fits. And you know, if you're going to go to the super conferences, if you're a school like Marquette, I'd almost rather see them just go there right now instead of go through this process of getting there, because you'll be dragged into these lesser conferences. You'll lose a little more luster. You know, I think it's tough. There's a basketball only or a non-revenue conference out there that makes sense for a lot of schools, Marquette being one of them. But you know, if you're dragged down to playing Loyola and Valparaiso in the interim, that's not doing much for your program, and it's not selling any tickets at the Bradley Center.
Let's move to the NBA, Steve. The preseason has been postponed. They announced this last week. They don't have a labor deal yet. Among the preseason games to be scrubbed, the MAC Fund game scheduled for October 15th. So the first several games of the preseason have been wiped out. As a casual fan here is talking the talk winner, how much do you care?
Not much. I'm sorry, I don't. I think it's a situation where the NBA is doing what they're doing right now because things got out of whack. They need to corral everything, get it back together, try to create a little even playing field, create an opportunity that if you're looking at a high-end free agent, he's going to look at a Milwaukee, which right now they're not. They never will unless that changes. My concern is that if this season doesn't happen, they become completely irrelevant in Milwaukee. They'll find out you could get through a winter without them, and then if they try to pump it back up and bring it back next year, people will be like, we found other stuff to do.
You know, I think it's the ultimate catch-22 because you have the Bucks as one of the franchises that could really benefit from a revamping of the economic structure of the NBA. But as Steve suggests, Tim, if you lose a year, the fan base you have right now, they start to say, well, there are other things to do.
Well, and you're both hitting on it. There are other things to do. You'll find other things to do. No matter what conference Marquette is in, Marquette will get more attention. It's a tough business model, I think. It's tough to sell 41 home games in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, or Sacramento, or Indianapolis, no matter what you have there, no matter how good your team is, no matter how appealing some of those matchups are. Tuesday night against the Cavaliers is just a tough thing to sell, and there are too many of those spots in the schedule. So if it's an entire revamping, a lot of things fall by the wayside. The Bucks are one of those things that wants to make sure they don't fall by the wayside.
And speaking of that, you and I were at the Bucks golf outing, which was rained out, so they had a luncheon instead in Mequon on Monday. And I asked Scott Skiles, with the attention and success of the Packers, the Brewers, and the Badgers, what's his message to Bucks fan? Let's listen in.
We know the situation. You know, I mean, look. You know, the Packers are, like a machine. You know, very few teams get, that good. Where they just kind of go about their business, and it's very difficult to contain them. And of course, as you said, the Brewers are having a great year. Wisconsin. I mean, we know that, it's important. We want those teams to do well. It's not that we're wishing anybody to do that. We want them to do well. But it puts pressure on us. To step up, in this market and do something for ourselves.
Well, just seconds remaining. We want to thank Steve Haise and congratulations for winning Talking the Talk. You did an exceptional job.
Thank you.
Stand by. We may call you again. Thanks for being on the show. And Tim Van Vorn from Fox 6 in Milwaukee, thanks as always. That's our Sports 32 Roundtable. We'll see you next time.